Lieutenant Sarah Martinez had dreamed of this moment for 3 years. Standing in the briefing room at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, she watched as her squad leader pointed to the tactical map on the wall. The mission was clear: infiltrate a terrorist compound in the mountains of Afghanistan and extract a high-value target who had information about an imminent attack on American soil. Sarah was the only woman in Echo Squad, a unit of 12 elite Navy SEALs. At 26 years old, she had fought tooth and nail to earn her place among these warriors. Every day brought new challenges, not just from the enemy, but from some of her own teammates, who still questioned whether a woman belonged in their ranks. The morning sun cast long shadows across the training compound as Echo Squad prepared for their final rehearsal before deployment. Sarah checked her gear methodically: M4 carbine, night vision goggles, communications equipment, and medical supplies. Everything had to be perfect. There was no room for error when lives were on the line. Squad leader Chief Petty Officer Marcus Thompson gathered the team around the mock-up of their target building. Thompson was a 15-year veteran with ice in his veins and scars that told stories of countless missions. He had initially been skeptical about having Sarah on his team, but her performance in training had slowly earned his grudging respect. The plan was straightforward but dangerous. They would insert via helicopter under cover of darkness, approach the compound through a valley that intelligence suggested was lightly guarded, breach the building simultaneously from 3 entry points, locate and extract the target, and exfiltrate to a predetermined landing zone 2 clicks away. Sarah's role was crucial. As the team's communications specialist and medic, she would be responsible for maintaining contact with command and providing medical support if anyone was wounded. She would enter through the rear of the building with a 4-man fire team led by Sergeant First Class Jake Morrison. Morrison was one of the few team members who had openly questioned Sarah's presence from day one. A hulking man from Texas with forearms like tree trunks, he made no secret of his belief that combat was no place for women. Despite Sarah's flawless performance in training exercises, Morrison continued to express doubts about her ability to handle the pressure of real combat. During the rehearsal, everything went smoothly. Sarah moved with fluid precision. Her communications were crystal clear, and her tactical positioning was textbook perfect, but she could feel the weight of every gaze upon her, measuring her every move, waiting for a mistake that would validate their doubts. That evening, as the team conducted final equipment checks, Sarah overheard a conversation that made her blood boil. Morrison was talking to 2 other team members near the equipment lockers. "I'm telling you, when the bullets start flying, she's going to freeze up," Morrison said in a low voice. "We've never had a woman on a mission this critical. What if she can't handle it? What if she puts the whole team at risk?" Petty Officer Second Class Danny Rodriguez, a young SEAL from California, shook his head. "Come on, Jake. She's proved herself in every training scenario. Her scores are better than half the guys on the team." Morrison's response was swift and harsh. "Training isn't combat, Rodriguez. When you're looking death in the face, when your brothers are bleeding out next to you, that's when you find out what someone's really made of. I've got 2 kids at home, and I'm not going to let political correctness get me killed." Sarah felt her cheeks burn with anger and frustration. She had endured months of similar comments, always professional on the surface, but carrying an undercurrent of doubt and resentment. Every successful training exercise, every perfect score on weapons qualifications, every display of tactical knowledge seemed to matter little to men like Morrison. She thought about her journey to this moment. Growing up in a military family in Colorado, Sarah had always known she wanted to serve her country. Her father, a decorated Army Ranger, had initially discouraged her from pursuing special operations, not because he doubted her abilities, but because he knew the challenges she would face in a male-dominated field. But Sarah was stubborn and determined. She excelled in college, earning a degree in emergency medicine before enlisting in the Navy. She completed basic training at the top of her class, then set her sights on the most challenging goal possible: becoming a Navy SEAL. The path had been brutal. The initial screening process eliminated 90% of candidates, but Sarah persevered. Hell Week, the infamous 5.5-day ordeal that breaks even the strongest candidates, nearly destroyed her. She endured hypothermia, exhaustion, and injuries that would have sent most people to the hospital. But she refused to quit. When she finally earned her SEAL trident, Sarah thought the hardest part was over. She was wrong. Being accepted into the Brotherhood was an ongoing battle that required her to prove herself again and again. The night before deployment, Sarah couldn't sleep. She lay in her bunk reviewing the mission parameters, visualizing every possible scenario. The target they were after was Dr. Hassan Natsiri, a biochemist who had been working with terrorist cells to develop chemical weapons. Intelligence indicated he wanted to defect and had valuable information about planned attacks, but time was running out. Enemy forces were closing in on his location, and there was a narrow window to extract him safely. The next morning came too quickly. As the team boarded the MH-60 Black Hawk helicopter that would take them to their insertion point, Sarah felt the familiar mixture of fear and excitement that preceded every dangerous mission. The helicopter's rotors churned the air as they lifted off into the pre-dawn darkness. During the flight, Chief Thompson went over the mission one final time. "Intel suggests minimal resistance," he shouted over the noise of the rotors. "But we all know Intel can be wrong. Stay sharp, watch your sectors, and remember your training. Martinez, you stick close to Morrison's team and keep those comms open." Sarah nodded, checking her radio equipment one last time. As the helicopter flew through the night sky toward enemy territory, she thought about all the people who had told her this day would never come. Her high school guidance counselor who suggested she consider nursing instead of the military. The drill instructor who told her she didn't have what it takes. The countless comments about how women weren't built for combat. But there were also the voices that had supported her. Her father, who despite his initial reservations, had become her biggest advocate. Her mother, who had served as a Navy nurse and understood the calling to serve. Chief Thompson, who had gradually come to respect her abilities, even if he didn't always show it. The helicopter began its descent toward the landing zone, a rocky plateau about 3 miles from the target compound. Sarah felt her heart rate increase as they approached the moment of truth. This was it, her first real combat mission as a Navy SEAL. As they touched down, the team moved out quickly and quietly. The Afghan mountains loomed around them like sleeping giants, their peaks barely visible against the star-filled sky. The air was thin and cold, and Sarah's breath formed small clouds as she moved through the darkness with her teammates. The approach to the compound took 2 hours of careful movement through rocky terrain. Sarah's training kicked in automatically. Scan left, scan right, check her 6, maintain proper spacing, watch for signs of enemy activity. Her equipment felt comfortable and familiar, an extension of her own body after months of training. As they crested a ridge that overlooked their target, Sarah could see the compound below. It was larger than the intelligence photos had suggested, with several outbuildings and what appeared to be more guards than expected. Chief Thompson called for a halt and gathered his team leaders for a quick assessment. "Looks like we've got more company than anticipated," he whispered into his radio. "Morrison, take your team around to the east side. Williams, you've got the front entrance. Rodriguez, you're with me on the west wall. Everyone maintain radio silence unless you have contact." Sarah adjusted her night vision goggles and checked her weapon one more time. This was the moment she had trained for, dreamed of, and feared all at the same time. As Morrison's team began their movement toward the eastern side of the compound, Sarah followed close behind, her senses heightened and her mind focused. The compound was surrounded by a low stone wall with razor wire on top. Intelligence had indicated there would be a breach point where Morrison's team could enter. But as they approached, it became clear that the gap had been recently repaired. Morrison cursed softly and signaled for the team to hold position while he assessed the situation. "Command, this is Echo 2, Morrison whispered into his radio. "Our entry point has been compromised. Requesting permission to improvise." The response came back quickly. "Echo 2, you are cleared to adapt as necessary. Time is critical." Morrison looked at his team, his eyes settling on Sarah for a moment longer than the others. She could see the doubt there. The question of whether she would hold up when things got complicated. Sarah met his gaze steadily, her jaw set with determination. We're going over the wall, Morrison decided. Rodriguez and Chen, you're first. Establish overwatch positions and cover our entry. Martinez, you're with me and Jackson. We go fast and we go quiet. The team moved into position. Rodriguez and Chen, both expert marksmen, scaled the wall with the grace of cats and disappeared into the shadows on the other side. After a tense minute, Rodriguez's voice crackled through their earpieces. Overwatch in position. You're clear to move. Morrison was the first over the wall, followed by Jackson, a demolitions expert from Maine. Sarah was third, her movements smooth and confident despite the weight of her gear. As she dropped silently into the compound, she could smell the acrid scent of diesel fuel and hear the distant murmur of voices from the main building. The team moved through the shadows toward their assigned entry point. Sarah's training had prepared her for this moment, but the reality of being in enemy territory sent adrenaline coursing through her veins. Every shadow could hide an enemy fighter. Every sound could signal discovery. As they approached the rear of the main building, Morrison held up his hand for the team to stop. Through her night vision goggles, Sarah could see two guards smoking cigarettes near a doorway. Morrison made quick hand signals. Take them quietly. What happened next would haunt Sarah for the rest of her life. As Morrison and Jackson moved to neutralize the guards, Sarah heard a sound behind them. The scrape of a boot on stone. She spun around to see an enemy fighter emerging from behind a storage shed, his rifle raised and pointed directly at Morrison's back. Time seemed to slow to a crawl. Sarah could see the muzzle flash beginning to bloom from the enemy's weapon. There was no time to shout a warning. No time to raise her own rifle. There was only one option. Sarah threw herself forward, tackling Morrison to the ground just as the enemy fighter's bullets whistled through the space where Morrison had been standing a split second before. The impact sent both SEALs sprawling onto the rocky ground, Sarah landing hard on her side with Morrison's full weight on top of her. The gunfire shattered the night's silence and sent the entire compound into chaos. Shouts erupted from multiple directions. Alarm bells began ringing, and spotlights blazed to life, sweeping the grounds for intruders. Morrison rolled off Sarah and immediately engaged the enemy fighter who had nearly killed him, his rifle barking twice in quick succession. The enemy dropped silently to the ground, but the damage was done. Their element of surprise was gone. Contact! Contact! Morrison shouted into his radio. Eastern team is compromised. Moving to secondary objective. As Sarah struggled to her feet, she felt a sharp pain in her left shoulder where she had hit the ground. But there was no time to assess injuries. The mission had to continue, and now it would be infinitely more dangerous. Chief Thompson's voice crackled through their earpieces. All teams, execute immediately. We've lost Surprise, but we still have speed. Get to that target and get him out. Sarah checked her rifle and followed Morrison toward the building. Despite the chaos around them, despite the pain in her shoulder, despite the knowledge that their lives were now hanging by a thread, she felt a strange sense of clarity. This was what she had trained for. This was her chance to prove that she belonged among these warriors. But as they moved through the compound toward their objective, Sarah had no idea that the events of the next few minutes would change everything. Not just for her, but for every person who had ever doubted whether a woman could stand shoulder to shoulder with the world's most elite fighters. The compound had erupted into complete chaos. Searchlights swept across the grounds while enemy fighters poured out of barracks buildings, their shouts echoing off the stone walls. Sarah pressed herself against the corner of the main building, her heart pounding as bullets whined overhead. Morrison grabbed her shoulder and pointed toward a window about 8 feet off the ground. That's our entry point, he shouted over the gunfire. Chen, give us a boost. Chen quickly formed a step with his hands, and Morrison climbed up to the window. He worked for 30 seconds with his tools before the window swung open silently. One by one, the team members climbed through into what appeared to be a storage room filled with wooden crates and metal containers. Sarah was the last one through. As she pulled herself over the windowsill, pain shot through her injured shoulder, but she gritted her teeth and dropped silently to the floor. Morrison was already at the door, listening for movement in the hallway beyond. Command. This is Echo 2, Morrison whispered into his radio. We're inside the main building. Moving toward target location, Chief Thompson's voice came back tense and urgent. Echo 2, be advised. Echo 1 and Echo 3 are engaged with heavy resistance. You need to reach that target fast. Intel suggests enemy reinforcements are en route. Morrison opened the door carefully and peered into the hallway. It was dimly lit and appeared empty, but Sarah could hear voices and footsteps coming from multiple directions. The building was larger than their intelligence had indicated, with multiple levels and numerous rooms where the target could be hidden. They moved down the hallway in single file, Sarah maintaining rear security while Rodriguez took point. Every few feet, they had to stop and listen as enemy fighters ran past intersecting corridors, searching for the intruders who had penetrated their stronghold. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only 3 minutes, Rodriguez held up his hand and pointed to a heavy wooden door at the end of the hallway. According to their intelligence, this was where Dr. Naziri was being held, but as they approached, Sarah noticed something that made her blood run cold. The door was standing slightly open, and she could see scuff marks on the floor leading away from it. Either the target had been moved, or this was a trap. Morrison saw it too. He signaled for the team to hold position while he examined the door more carefully. After a moment, he shook his head grimly and spoke into his radio. Command, Echo 2. Target location appears to have been compromised. Evidence suggests the package has been moved. The response was immediate and urgent. Echo 2. Negative. Signal intelligence indicates the target is still in the building. He may have been moved to a different location. You need to find him. Morrison's jaw tightened. Searching a building this size while under fire was extremely dangerous, but they had their orders. He gathered his team around him and pulled out a hand-drawn floor plan. Okay, we split up, he decided. Rodriguez and Chen, you take the upper level. Jackson and I will check the basement. Martinez, you hold this position and monitor communications. If anyone finds the target, we rally here and move to extraction. Sarah felt a surge of frustration. Being left behind felt like being benched during the most important game of her career. Sir, with respect, I should be with one of the teams. If someone gets wounded, Morrison cut her off sharply. Martinez, you follow orders. We need someone maintaining comms and watching our 6. That's your job. As the two teams split up and disappeared into the building's maze-like interior, Sarah took up a defensive position at the intersection of 2 hallways. She could hear gunfire from outside growing more intense, which meant her teammates were under increasing pressure. Minutes passed like hours. Sarah's radio crackled with updates from the search teams, but none of them had found any sign of Dr. Naziri. Meanwhile, Chief Thompson's voice grew increasingly urgent as he reported enemy reinforcements moving toward the compound. Then Sarah heard something that changed everything. From somewhere below her position came the sound of someone speaking in accented English. Not Arabic or Dari, but heavily accented English with what sounded like a German or Austrian accent. Please, you must listen to me. The chemical weapons facility is not where your intelligence suggests. It has been moved to a location near the Pakistani border. Thousands of innocent people will die if you do not act quickly. Sarah's mind raced. That had to be Dr. Naziri, and he was somewhere in the basement level where Morrison and Jackson were supposed to be searching. But if she could hear him, why couldn't they? She made a decision that would have consequences far beyond what she could imagine. Instead of staying at her assigned position, Sarah moved toward a staircase she had spotted earlier that led to the basement level. If the target was down there and Morrison's team couldn't find him, she would. The basement was a labyrinth of storage rooms and mechanical spaces. Sarah moved carefully through the darkness, following the sound of voices that grew stronger as she penetrated deeper into the building's underground level. Her night vision goggles revealed a maze of pipes and electrical conduits that created perfect hiding spots for enemy fighters. As she rounded a corner, Sarah saw a sight that made her heart skip a beat. Dr. Naziri, a thin man in his 50s with graying hair and wire-rimmed glasses, was being interrogated by 2 enemy fighters in a small room at the end of a corridor. One of the fighters held an AK-47, while the other appeared to be the leader, a bearded man in military fatigues who was demanding information from the scientist. Sarah immediately got on her radio. Echo 2, Echo 2. This is Martinez. I have eyes on the target. Basement level, east side of the building. 2 hostiles. I need immediate backup. Morrison's voice came back angry and confused. Martinez, what the hell are you doing? You were ordered to maintain position. Sir, the target is here, and he's in immediate danger. They appear to be preparing to execute him. There was a pause, then Morrison's voice again. Hold position, Martinez. Do not engage. We're moving to your location. But even as Morrison spoke, Sarah could see that there might not be time. The leader was pulling out a pistol and pointing it at Dr. Naziri's head. The scientist was pleading for his life, trying to convince his captors that he was more valuable alive than dead. Sarah faced an impossible decision. Her orders were to wait for backup. But waiting might mean watching an innocent man die and losing critical intelligence that could save thousands of lives. Every second of hesitation increased the likelihood that the mission would fail. She thought about all the training scenarios where split-second decisions meant the difference between success and failure. She thought about the oath she had taken to protect innocent lives. And she thought about all the people who had said a woman couldn't handle the pressure of combat. Sarah made her choice. Moving with the stealth she had perfected in countless training exercises, she worked her way closer to the room where Dr. Naziri was being held. The enemy fighters had their backs to the doorway, focused entirely on their prisoner. Sarah could see that there was only one way in or out of the room, which meant she would have to neutralize both targets before either could react. Taking a deep breath, Sarah stepped into the doorway and fired twice in rapid succession. Both enemy fighters dropped without ever knowing what hit them. Dr. Naziri looked up in shock, his face pale with terror and confusion. Dr. Naziri, I'm with the U.S. Navy. We're here to get you out, Sarah said quickly, moving into the room and checking the corners for additional threats. The scientist nodded rapidly, tears of relief streaming down his face. Yes. I am Hassan Naziri. Thank God you have come. I have information about chemical weapons, about planned attacks. Many people will die if... Sir, we'll discuss that once we're safe, Sarah interrupted. Right now we need to move. Can you walk? Dr. Naziri nodded and struggled to his feet. Sarah could see that he had been beaten, but he appeared mobile. She helped him toward the door, her rifle at the ready. That's when everything went wrong. As they stepped into the corridor, Sarah heard the distinctive sound of multiple footsteps approaching rapidly. She pushed Dr. Naziri back into the room and took up a defensive position in the doorway just as 6 enemy fighters rounded the corner at the far end of the corridor. The firefight was intense and immediate. Sarah's training took over as she engaged multiple targets while simultaneously trying to protect the scientist behind her. Her rifle barked repeatedly as she moved from cover to cover, using the doorframe and corners of the room to shield herself from return fire. But she was outnumbered 6-1, and the enemy fighters were advancing methodically down the corridor. Sarah knew she couldn't hold them off indefinitely, and Dr. Naziri would be killed if they were overrun. Echo 2, Echo 2, she shouted into her radio between bursts of gunfire. I am engaged with multiple hostiles. I have the target, but I'm pinned down. Morrison's voice came back immediately. Martinez, hold tight. We're 30 seconds out. 30 seconds felt like 30 minutes. Sarah's ammunition was running low, and the enemy fighters were getting closer. She could hear Dr. Naziri whimpering behind her, and she knew that if she failed, not only would an innocent man die, but critical intelligence would be lost. That's when Sarah did something that no one, including herself, expected. Instead of continuing to fight defensively, she made a decision that seemed completely insane but was actually tactically brilliant. She grabbed a flashbang grenade from her belt, pulled the pin, and threw it down the corridor toward the advancing enemy fighters. Then, instead of taking cover, she charged directly toward them as the grenade exploded. The flashbang created a brief moment of confusion and disorientation among the enemy fighters. In that moment, Sarah advanced aggressively, firing rapidly and accurately as she moved. Her sudden assault caught the enemy completely off guard. They had expected her to remain in a defensive position, not charge directly into their superior numbers. Using the temporary advantage created by her unexpected tactics, Sarah managed to neutralize 3 of the 6 fighters before they could recover from the flashbang's effects. The remaining 3, however, quickly regained their composure and began to concentrate their fire on her position. Sarah dove behind a concrete support pillar as bullets chipped away at the concrete around her. She was now separated from Dr. Nasiri by 30 feet of corridor controlled by enemy fighters, and she was running dangerously low on ammunition. Just when the situation seemed hopeless, Sarah heard the most beautiful sound in the world: Morrison's voice shouting commands as Echo 2's backup team arrived. The sound of American weapons fire echoed through the basement as Morrison, Jackson, Rodriguez, and Chen engaged the remaining enemy fighters from behind. The firefight lasted another minute before the basement fell silent, except for the ringing in everyone's ears. Sarah slowly emerged from behind her cover, her rifle still at the ready, scanning for any remaining threats. "Clear," Morrison shouted. "Clear," Rodriguez echoed from the other end of the corridor. Sarah ran back to the room where Dr. Nasiri was huddled in the corner, shaking with fear but uninjured. "Sir, we need to move now," she said, helping him to his feet again. As the team prepared to extract with their target, Morrison approached Sarah. His face was unreadable, but she could see something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Martinez," he said quietly, "that was either the bravest or the most reckless thing I've ever seen. Maybe both." Sarah wasn't sure if that was a compliment or a criticism, but there was no time to discuss it. Chief Thompson's voice crackled through their radios with an urgent update that would make their extraction far more complicated than anyone had anticipated. "All Echo teams, be advised. Enemy reinforcements have arrived in significant numbers. Primary extraction point is compromised. We're going to have to fight our way out." As they began their movement toward the surface, Sarah had no idea that the most challenging part of the mission was still ahead of them, and that her actions in the next 20 minutes would earn her a place in Navy SEAL legend. The team emerged from the basement to find the main level of the building transformed into a war zone. Bullet holes dotted the walls, debris covered the floor, and the acrid smell of gunpowder hung thick in the air. Through the windows, Sarah could see muzzle flashes from multiple positions around the compound perimeter. Dr. Nasiri stayed close behind Sarah as Morrison led the team toward their planned exit point. But as they approached the rear door, Rodriguez's voice crackled urgently through their communications. "Echo 2. This is Rodriguez. Exit point is compromised. At least 20 fighters have that position locked down tight." Morrison cursed under his breath and quickly reassessed their options. The compound was surrounded. Their extraction point was blocked, and they had a civilian scientist to protect. They needed a new plan. Fast. Chief Thompson's voice came through their earpieces. "All teams, rally at the northeast corner of the compound. We're going to have to create our own exit." Moving through the building while protecting Dr. Nasiri required careful coordination. Sarah stayed close to the scientist, ready to shield him with her own body if necessary. The man was clearly terrified, but trying to be brave, occasionally mumbling information about chemical weapons that could be crucial to preventing future attacks. As they made their way through the corridor, enemy fighters appeared ahead of them. Morrison and Jackson immediately engaged, while Sarah pulled Dr. Nasiri into an adjacent room for cover. Through the doorway, she could see her teammates moving with the fluid precision that made Navy SEALs legendary. But as the firefight intensified, Sarah noticed something that made her blood run cold. Dr. Nasiri was bleeding from his side. A bullet had grazed him during the earlier engagement in the basement. The wound wasn't immediately life-threatening, but he was losing blood and would need medical attention soon. Sarah quickly applied pressure to the wound and used supplies from her medical kit to create a temporary bandage. "Sir, you're going to be fine," she assured him. "We're going to get you out of here." Dr. Nasiri grabbed her arm with surprising strength. "Listen to me," he said urgently. "The chemical weapons facility, it's not just about the location. They have developed something new. Something terrible. A weaponized version of VX nerve agent that can be deployed through water supplies. The attack is planned for next week." Sarah's mind raced. This information was even more critical than they had realized. Not only did they need to extract Dr. Naziri safely, but they needed to ensure he could provide detailed intelligence to prevent a catastrophic terrorist attack. Morrison appeared in the doorway. "We need to move. Now." The team fought their way through the building room by room. Sarah found herself in the middle of combat situations she had only imagined in training. At one point, she found herself separated from the main team when an enemy fighter appeared around a corner, blocking her path. The fight was brief, but intense. The enemy fighter was larger and stronger than Sarah, but her training gave her the advantage she needed. Using hand-to-hand combat techniques drilled into her through countless hours of practice, she managed to neutralize the threat and rejoin her team. When they finally reached the rally point, Sarah could see the full scope of their predicament. The compound was surrounded by at least 50 enemy fighters, and more were arriving by the minute. Chief Thompson had gathered the surviving members of all three teams, 12 SEALs total. But several were wounded, including Jackson, who had taken a bullet in the leg. "Here's the situation," Chief Thompson said grimly. "Primary and secondary extraction points are both compromised. Enemy reinforcements are arriving from the north and east. We're going to have to punch through their lines and reach the alternate LZ 3 clicks south." Sarah looked at Dr. Naziri, who was pale and weakening from blood loss. 3 kilometers of movement through enemy territory with a wounded civilian was going to be extremely challenging, especially while being pursued by superior numbers. That's when Sarah made another decision that would surprise everyone, including herself. "Chief, I recommend we split into 2 teams," she said. "The main team creates a diversion and draws off the majority of enemy fighters. A small team takes Dr. Naziri on a more direct route to the extraction point." Morrison shook his head immediately. "Too risky. We stay together." But Chief Thompson was listening. "What are you thinking, Martinez?" Sarah pointed to her map. "Sir, there's a narrow canyon about half a click west of here. It's not on any of the enemy patrol routes, and it leads directly toward the alternate LZ. A team of 3 could move faster and more quietly than the entire squad." "And who would be on this small team?" Thompson asked. Sarah met his gaze steadily. "Myself, Dr. Naziri, and 1 other operator for security." Morrison stepped forward. "Chief, this is crazy. Martinez isn't experienced enough for that kind of independent operation." But Rodriguez surprised everyone by speaking up. "Actually, sir, Martinez might be right. Her plan has merit, and she's proved tonight that she can handle herself in combat." For a moment, the only sound was distant gunfire, as enemy fighters continued to search for them. Chief Thompson studied Sarah's face, weighing the risks and benefits of her proposal. "The main team would need to create one hell of a diversion," he said finally. Sarah nodded. "Sir, if the main team makes a lot of noise and appears to be moving toward the eastern LZ, they'll draw most of the enemy fighters in that direction. The small team can use the confusion to slip away unnoticed." After another moment of consideration, Thompson made his decision. "Rodriguez, you go with Martinez and the package. The rest of us will create enough noise to wake the dead and lead them on a chase toward the eastern extraction point." Morrison's face was grim, but he didn't argue with his commanding officer. Instead, he approached Sarah and handed her extra ammunition magazines. "Don't get Rodriguez killed," he said quietly. "And don't get yourself killed either." Sarah nodded, understanding that this was Morrison's way of saying he respected her judgment, even if he didn't agree with her plan. The 2 teams prepared to separate. Chief Thompson's group would move out first, engaging enemy positions and making as much noise as possible to draw attention away from Sarah's route. Sarah, Rodriguez, and Dr. Naziri would wait 10 minutes, then move toward the canyon. As Thompson's team disappeared into the darkness, Sarah could hear the sound of gunfire intensifying as they engaged enemy positions. The diversion was working. She could see enemy fighters moving toward the sound of combat, leaving other areas more lightly defended. "Ready?" she asked Rodriguez and Dr. Naziri. Both men nodded, and they began their movement toward the canyon. Sarah took point, with Dr. Naziri in the middle and Rodriguez covering their rear. The scientist was moving slowly but determinedly. still clutching the bandage over his wound. The first part of their movement went smoothly. Using natural cover and avoiding the main paths, they managed to reach the canyon entrance without being detected. But as they began moving through the narrow passage, Sarah heard something that made her heart sink. Voices. Enemy fighters speaking in Arabic, and they were close. Sarah held up her hand for the team to stop and listened carefully. There were at least 4 fighters, maybe more, and they appeared to be moving through the canyon ahead of them. Somehow, the enemy had anticipated this route. Rodriguez moved up next to Sarah and whispered in her ear. Ambush? Sarah nodded grimly. They could turn back and try to rejoin the main team. But that would expose Dr. Naziri to even greater danger. Or they could try to fight their way through, but that would alert every enemy fighter in the area to their position. Sarah made another split-second decision that would be talked about in Navy SEAL training courses for years to come. She handed her rifle to Rodriguez and pulled out her sidearm and knife. "Give me 60 seconds," she whispered. "When you hear my signal, come through fast." Before Rodriguez could protest, Sarah disappeared into the shadows of the canyon wall. Using skills she had perfected in countless training exercises, she moved through the darkness like a ghost. The enemy fighters never knew what hit them. Sarah eliminated all 4 with a combination of stealth, hand-to-hand combat techniques, and precise shooting. When Rodriguez heard her signal and moved forward with Dr. Nasiri, they found the path clear. "Jesus, Martinez," Rodriguez breathed as he looked at the neutralized enemies. "Where did you learn to do that?" Sarah just smiled grimly and took her rifle back. "Same place you did, Rodriguez. Bud. S training." The rest of their movement to the extraction point went without incident. As they approached the landing zone, Sarah could hear the distinctive sound of helicopter rotors in the distance. Their ride home was coming. Dr. Naziri, despite his wound and exhaustion, was alert enough to provide Sarah with additional details about the planned terrorist attack. The information he shared would prove invaluable in preventing what could have been one of the deadliest chemical weapons attacks in history. When the extraction helicopter touched down, Sarah helped Dr. Naziri aboard and then took up a security position until the rest of Echo Squad arrived. Chief Thompson's diversion had worked perfectly. They had led enemy fighters on a chase across several kilometers of rough terrain before disappearing and making their way to the extraction point. As the helicopter lifted off and Afghanistan's mountains fell away below them, Sarah finally allowed herself to relax. The mission had been successful. Dr. Naziri was safe, and they had obtained intelligence that would save countless lives. But the real impact of the mission became clear only after they returned to base. Chief Thompson's after-action report praised Sarah's tactical thinking, her performance under fire, and her crucial role in the mission's success. More importantly, Morrison approached her the day after they returned. "Martinez," he said, extending his hand. "I owe you an apology. And I owe you my life. That fighter in the compound would have killed me if you hadn't acted." Sarah shook his hand. "We're a team, Morrison. That's what teams do." Morrison nodded slowly. "Yes, we are a team. And you're a hell of a warrior, Martinez. I'd be proud to serve with you on any mission." Word of Sarah's performance spread quickly through the SEAL community. The woman who had been knocked to the ground in front of her squad had not only gotten back up, but had stunned every Navy SEAL on the mission with her courage, tactical brilliance, and combat effectiveness. 6 months later, Sarah was selected for promotion and assigned to an elite counterterrorism unit. Her story became part of Navy SEAL lore, told to new recruits as an example of how courage, determination, and skill could overcome any obstacle. Dr. Nasiri's intelligence proved accurate, and the chemical weapons facility was destroyed in a follow-up operation before any attacks could be carried out. Thousands of innocent lives were saved because a young woman from Colorado refused to let doubt and prejudice define what she was capable of achieving. Years later, when young women would ask Sarah how she managed to succeed in such a male-dominated field, her answer was always the same. "You don't have to be perfect, you just have to be prepared, stay focused, and never give up. And when you get knocked down, you get back up and keep fighting." Sarah's story proved that heroism isn't defined by gender, size, or background. It's defined by the willingness to put others before yourself, to stand up when it matters most, and to never stop fighting for what's right. In the end, that's what being a warrior truly means.